things I quickly learned when I moved from selling cars to presenting a motoring channel on YouTube was that people have different perceptions to me of brands. If you look at myself and the rest of the Auto EV team, my colleagues Charlie and Rod, we're kind of what we would class as, well, probably old car bores in some respects. Images of manufacturers we tend to have reflected upon us, and we know what cars that we like, what cars that we would choose with our own money, or what cars that we would take on that fantasy road trip. But people who really aren't into cars don't really have that preconceived idea about certain brands. Take our friend Wayne Goss, who was on our Ioniq 5 video recently. Now Wayne he admits he knows not really a huge amount about cars, but he knows what he likes, he knows what looks good, and he knows what's going to fit into his lifestyle. And he declared the Ioniq 5 a real winner. Now, 10 years ago, could we as old fuddy-duddy car bores have ever imagined using the word style and Hyundai, let alone technology and groundbreaking EVs, in the same sentence? Probably not. Therefore, a new brand with no history, no reputation, good or bad, can start with a clean sheet of paper, because obviously we have no preconceived ideas about it. In which case, let me welcome you to ORA, the first of what will no doubt be a deluge of new electric vehicles for 2022 from China. Welcome to the ORA Cat, and of course, as always, welcome to Auto EV. Now, before we go any further, our usual housekeeping rules apply. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the Auto EV channel, and press the little bell button down below so you receive notification of when the next video goes live. We have a huge amount of great content coming over the next few months, so you really won't want to miss out on it. Anyway, let's get back to the car itself. Who, what, and why? Let's start with the who. So ORA, they are a new brand, or relatively new. 2018 they came into existence, and they are a subsidiary of Great Wall Motors. Now you may even ask who Great Wall Motors are, but they have had a presence in the UK so far for the last few years, bringing in the Steed pickup. But they are still obviously a very small fish in what is quite a big pond. Let's look at some numbers. If you look at global sales from Ford, which has been around pretty much since the dawn of the motor car, in 2020 the Ford Motor Company sold globally just over 4 million cars. Great Wall, well, they sold just over 1.1 million cars. Now that's pretty good. A quarter of the colossus of what Ford sold. A relatively unknown company to us, Great Wall Motors, managed to do that. ORA, what are they? Well, they are going to be an EV-only subsidiary of Great Wall Motors. There's going to be other subsidiaries come out, WEY, W-E-Y, which are going to do kind of big, sort of like luxurious kind of SUV styles. We're going to see some of them. In fact, we did see them at the recent Munich Motor Show along with this car. Why? Well, that's quite simple to answer, and it comes down to this. China now needs to become a massive player in the global automotive market. It might surprise you to know that not only does China make the most electric cars in the world, but the Chinese also buy the largest number of electric cars in the world. The Chinese aren't coming, they're already here. And in terms of the Chinese, if you think to yourself, you don't really want to buy a Chinese brand, let me just tell you this. The Tesla Model 3, the BMW iX3, the Volkswagen ID4 are already built in China, and a huge amount of the componentry and technology that's in your current cars also come from the Chinese. You just don't know about it, that's all. Now, it's such an important marketplace, China. Volkswagen themselves actually produce the ID6, a car we don't even get, which is a big 7-seat electric SUV purely for China. Years ago, BMW, Audi and Mercedes built long wheelbase models of the 3 Series, A4 and C-Class respectively, just for the Chinese market. It is a huge market and we cannot ignore it. Oh, And remember, they own MG now. So let's start with the styling. Now, ORA say they are influenced by fashion, design, and urban culture. Okay, but irrespective of my thoughts on that, we know that with a brand new car or brand new product, design is key because it's the visual aspect that makes us want it, that makes us desire it. I mean, look at Apple, for instance. I mean, the product was there, but wow, the original iPod, the original iPhone, didn't it look slick in comparison with everything else that was in the marketplace? It's quite a deceptive car, the Cat, because when I first saw it in pictures, I was convinced it was going to be a mini Fiat 500 Honda E-style competitor, that B-sector Super Mini. But in reality, it's actually closer in size to the Volkswagen ID3, so the C-sector family hatchbacks. In fact, it's only 3 centimetres shorter than an ID3, but it's actually taller and wider than that car. Another car you might want to sort of like lump her in with is something like, say, a Renault Zoe, but again, it is a sort of, that is more of a sort of super mini sized car, but the Cat will transcend both of those classes. Now, in terms of its styling, I happen to think this looks fantastic. A few years back, there was a massive backlash and, well, a few legal shenanigans surrounding some of Chinese car manufacturers who were literally just blatantly copying design from Western companies. The Cat doesn't do that, but it has elements of cars sort of like in its styling. And if you look a little bit closely, I mean, look at these headlights, for instance. I mean, they are pure kind of new generation Mini One with the sort of like the LED sort of like ring around them. These bonnet humps here, they're not slightly reminiscent of the Porsche Cayenne in my opinion, but together the whole thing has that mini 911-esque look going on, but it's of its own style. It carries it off really, really well. The badge, prominent right on the front, this big sort of exclamation mark here, and then of course down the front, there's no grille on the car for obvious reasons. I mean, there's cooling down at the bottom there and a nice front splitter. But other than that, there's no grille to sort of like fill in that you get on some of the legacy manufacturers that we've seen so far. And there's some really neat styling touches around the whole vehicle that we'll see. Now, exact trim levels have still yet to be decided for the UK, but it's fairly certain that there's going to be sort of like a lead-in model, an entry level, a medium, a high spec, and there will also be a GT specification, which won't be any difference in terms of performance, but it will just look a little bit sort of sportier, a little bit more kind of red flashes through it and more of that kind of mini GTI style look about it. But as I say, it won't have any difference in terms of its performance. They're 5 doors only, and as I say, it is quite a long car. As I say, it's 3 centimetres shorter than ID3, as I say, but it really is quite distinctive. I mean, it's not bland in any way, but it's clean, it's unfussy. It's got quite a nice kind of Coke bottle kind of shape to the side of it. This particular car isn't a full UK spec car as yet, so you'll see charging ports on either side. The UK cars will just have the one charging port and CCS will be standard, but I'll come on to that later. You've got some nice 5-spoke alloy wheels on the side of the car. See, it's quite a tall little car, so there's good headroom inside it. It's quite a well thought out design actually, but if you think the front reminds you of something, wait till you see the back. You see what I mean? It's quite shapely, but can anyone else see sort of like echoes of first generation Nissan Leaf? Renault Megane shaking its booty there, you know, the bustle back Megane. It's quite distinctive though. I mean, if you look at the lights, they're embedded into this screen here, and they do this funky kind of dance as you switch the car on. So that's actually your tail lights there. And then the rear brake, high level brake lights up there. You've got reversing lights down in there with indicators, and then a centrally mounted fog light down there, bit where the exhaust would be on a Mini Cooper S. Big blatant ORA across the back. Now the GT that we've seen doesn't get the big badge across the back, but it's clean, it's unfussy. Yeah, it cuts its own dash. It maybe has elements of other cars about it, but all culminated together, I think it's quite a distinctive looking little car. Now, in terms of practicality, the boot space, well, it's not huge, it's okay. It is 228 litres. Now, that's down on the ID3, which is 385 litres, down on the Renault Zoe at 338 litres, but it is bigger than the Mini Electric, which is 211 litres, and obviously much bigger than the Honda E and the Fiat 500. The space itself is, well, it's actually okay. I mean, it's quite a usable space. It's not a flat entry into it. You've got a drop down onto the boot floor. Underneath here, there is some cable storage as well. There's nothing up at the front. That's all mechanicals. There's no front boot or fruit or frunk or whatever you want to call it. There's none of that. A little parcel shelf to cover it, which kind of does remind me of the Fiat 500. But you do at least get the split fold rear seat, the 60/40 split seat, which just operates just off those two tabs at either side. So you can extend it, you know, into much bigger space. But I suppose it really depends how you're going to use the car. But it's not the biggest boot in its class, certainly, depending obviously on what car you're comparing it to. Now, rear space and the rear seat is pretty good. Now, I've set this driver's seat up for myself, and it's I'm 5'7", 5'8", and I've got plenty of leg room. For a car that's wider than the ID3, it feels a little bit more enclosed, which is, you know, maybe a little bit odd. This feels a bit tight on my shoulder here, but it's not uncomfortably so. There's a decent amount of space across the back bench as well. You've got, as dear as damn it, a flat load floor there. There's a tiny little ridge in the middle of the thing, so certainly if someone was sitting in the middle of this seat, then I don't think they've had much to complain about. There's a flip down armrest with some cup holders, so it's quite comfortable. You know, you've got the mat pockets here. This car's fitted with a sunroof, which again, depending on the spec and the final choice of trim levels and stuff like, may not be on the car that you're interested in. So headroom is pretty okay, actually. Again, for myself, there's enough. So certainly somebody of 6 foot, I think, would still be quite comfortable back here. The seats themselves are quite supportive, and obviously with the batteries being sort of like mostly underneath the car, you don't get that impression that your legs are being forced up. It's quite nice, as I say, it's quite comfortable. It's quite surprisingly spacious back here. As I say, the car, that's the whole thing I keep coming back to. It's quite deceptive when you see it. You think it's going to be a small Super Mini. It really isn't. It's quite a big car. And if you thought the outside was interesting, then the interior is, well, quite something, if I'm honest with you. I think it's got to be one of the nicest interiors for this class of car that I've actually sat in. It also reminds me a little bit of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Mercedes EQA, because you've got these two 10.25 inch screens together, which are then embedded sort of like into the dashboard. Now, what's nice about that is they're low enough that they don't impede into your view, so rather than having a sort of tablet thing stuck on here, everything's nice and easy and you've got a good view out of the car. Now, in terms of what they actually do, you've got your driver information system here in the front, and you've got a sort of like a battery meter here, speedometer in the centre, and then a power meter here, which these two outer ones are done in sort of like a drum style, which reminds me a little bit of the old sort of like revolving drums, the Citroen BX, Mark 1 BX, or the Jaguar XJS, but I think I'm probably showing my age there. But it's nice and clear, as I say. There's enough information there, exactly what you'd expect to find. And then obviously your centre infotainment system here. Now, the car also features a 360-degree parking camera, which I have no idea how these things work, but they do, and as far as I'm concerned, it's witchcraft and it's wonderful. So that's on the car. Also, infotainment system here, depending obviously on what you want to do, and navigation and such. So now, as I say, this car is not final UK specification. I'm talking to the guys here, they're talking potentially you're going to have things like wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, which would be great. The design, however, is phenomenal. You've got this lovely sort of strip vent which splits the dashboard here. It's very Art Deco looking, especially then with these sort of like little toggle switches here, which have got more than a sort of like a passing nod to the first of the new generation Minis when they had the little toggle switches. Storage is good. Got a tray down in here, a couple of cup holders. Got this lovely centre console area here, which is really nice and cleanly designed. And just the sort of right height for comfort. Your rotary dial for the transmission selector, reverse, neutral and drive, is very reminiscent of the Kia. You get those, and again, this console, it looks a little bit like the e-Niro Hyundai Ioniq 5 type of console. In terms of build quality, think about, if you've been used to something like, say, a Hyundai Kona or Renault Zoe, It's that sort of quality in here. There is a really nice feeling that the car is well screwed together. There's no sort of like cheap sort of like plastics. Everything looks nice. Yes, there's some slightly harder ones down in the lower dash, but this sort of material up here, which looks like aniline leather, but obviously isn't, and the seats, which again look like leather but aren't. They're kind of vegan friendly and sustainable materials. They've got the kind of diamond quilting on the doors and the top of the seats here, and the sort of the centre fluting. It feels like quite a luxury, you know, sort of like super mini, or, you know, sort of small hatch. As I say, the final specs have yet to be decided. They're maybe talking of an entry level, a mid-range, a high spec, which this one sort of gives you the impression this would be, and then the GT, which is a bit more sportier and things a bit red and black, you know, like a man's wash bag from the 1980s. This is quite an interesting little thing up here. There's a driver recognition system that's mounted here. Now that, if you and your partner drive the car and you've got things like your seat setting, if you've got the electric seats set up, or your particular radio stations, that will recognise who's in the car and set the car up accordingly, which is quite clever. It'll also help with things such as driver drowsiness awareness and that type of thing. What else have we got down here? Well, as I say, there's this nice sort of centre console. It's got wireless pad here for your mobile phone for charging, little pen tray in there, deep cubby. Storage is okay, decent size kind of glove box, you know, door bins either side, as I say, a couple of cup holders. This lovely sort of like elegant 2-spoke steering wheel as well, with all the kind of controls here, which are physical buttons, you know, for cruise control, and going through your menu systems, obviously depending on what you look to see, radio and Bluetooth as well. And then on the door panel here, you've got the sort of the window switches and the electric door mirrors, I should say, and some of them mode buttons, you know, for sport and economy down here, and traction control are mounted down here. So really well thought out interior, and as I say, the feeling of quality is something that really kind of hits you when you first sit inside it. Now, ORA is, as I say, the sort of design-led urban culture. That's what they're kind of talking about, and they also expect a high amount of female buyers as well for the car. And the whole car just doesn't feel intimidating in terms of its tech, and it feels like, I say, it's just been a well thought out and well kind of designed place to spend a bit of time in. So I think they're going to have a bit of success with this, and as I say, it's one of the nicest interiors in its class, I have to say. Yeah. Now the Cat's going to come with the option of 2 batteries, a 48 kilowatt hour one, which should give up to 209 miles according to the WLTP cycle. You'll also have the option of a higher one, a 63 kilowatt hour battery, which should increase that range to 261 miles. So it's pretty competitive, exactly where you'd expect it to be, you know, across the classes that the car will compete with. As I mentioned before, CCS charging port will be fitted to the UK cars. They will also come with an onboard 11 kilowatt charger as well, meaning you can use 3-phase electricity if you have your 11 kilowatt home wall box. They haven't released any sort of charging times, but given that the car will take a charging rate of up to 80 kilowatts, you can sort of expect that 10 to 80% charging rate in the benchmark 30 minutes. So again, exactly where you'd expect to find it in terms of the rest of the competition. Now, we're not able to drive the car today, so our impressions of performance and handling are going to have to wait until we can subject a Cat to the full auto EV road test. But here's a couple of numbers just to whet your appetite. The front mounted motor produces 171 PS, which should see the Cat scamper to 60 miles an hour in around about 8.5 seconds. In other words, perfectly acceptable for a 5-door family car. Now the GT Cat, or the Cat GT, is a trim level. It's going to look a little bit sportier. It's going to have little red accents, rear spoiler, that type of thing, but in terms of its performance, it's not going to be any different to the car we have here. And in terms of competition for the car, well, as I say, it sort of transcends a couple of classes. It's small B sector super minis such as the Mini Electric, the Honda E, the Fiat 500, the Renault Zoe, Peugeot E208, Vauxhall Corsa Electric in one camp, but as I say, in terms of its physical size, it's closer to things like the Volkswagen ID3 and Citroen EC4. But bear in mind, there's also sort of like some of the small kind of compact crossovers that you might also see the car competing with, such as the Vauxhall Mokka Electric and the Peugeot E2008, and perhaps things like the Hyundai Kona. So will 2022 be, as Al Stewart once sang, the year of the cat? Well, as I say, we're going to have to wait until we subject it to the full Auto EV road test before we can bring you that definitive verdict. But early impressions from today certainly look good. The design is its own unique identity, and as I say, there's no preconceived ideas about a brand that, let's be honest, we don't really know anything about. But if it's as good to drive as it is to look at, and in terms of the way the interior feels, then it's looking very, very promising indeed. This is going to be the first of many new EVs that we're going to see in 2022. And as always, we would urge you to stay connected with Auto EV as we bring you all the latest news and reviews of those cars as they become available. Thank you again for watching, and as always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the Auto EV channel and press the little bell button that's down below so you receive notification of when those videos become live. And as always, it's time now for you to head over to autoev.co.uk so you can literally feast on our back catalogue of road test reviews, sneak peeks and electric icons. Until next time, we'll see you again. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.